to infinity and beyond.
Everybody, Roger and James here from Infinity and Beyond, and in this episode we're going to be discussing our favourite handheld games from the Disney side of things. So, giving a little bit of history for myself. See, I'm going back to my very first few handhelds where like Game & Watch and some really like individual games. So I've been playing handheld games since way back in the early 80s. Nintendo Game Gear, I had a Game Boy. I think I remember playing on a friend's Game Gear. You know, I had the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy SP, skipped the DS, though my wife did get one, so I kind of ended up jumping into that a little bit later on. PSP, I had the PSP, I also had the PS Vita, and I've got a 2DS, and I've also got the Switch. So over the last 30 years, handhelds have been part of... I've always had a handheld. I've actually got quite a few, but it's always been about holidays and going away. I've never been I think ever since once I got my proper consoles, I've always been like with handhelds as being a little bit like... I use it a lot less. I have to be honest, I've probably used my Switch as a handheld more than I did my Vita that I had for like 3 years. It's... I'm an odd one with handhelds. I like them. I buy stuff for them. I always buy the handheld machines, and I buy a few games for them to travel with every time. But I'm not someone that ever used to sort of sit on the couch and play a game because I had the console, and I think that's this odd thing for me with handhelds. I don't know about your history with handhelds.
Yeah, at least in terms of like just handhelds themselves. I used to travel a lot for work. We had to do a lot of software deployments in locations, so I'd travel a lot. And that meant, having something to keep me entertained. And this was, before tablets were really all that popular and whatnot. So my Game Boy Advance actually saw a lot of use, but not when I was at home, because there's no point in playing at home when I had the regular system right there. Having said that, I've been thinking about it, and the number of Disney games that I had handheld was... I can't actually think of any Disney games that I had as a handheld growing up.
Yeah, see, I go back to when I was a child, back when I had my Game Boy, and we're talking in the original Game Boy, in green. And one of the things back then was only having the NES and the Mega Drive hooked up in the living room was that you couldn't play... If Mum and Dad were watching television, you couldn't play. There was this kind of, you were restricted. So obviously once we became an adult, that became less of a thing. But while I didn't go and buy any Disney games, one thing that my dad picked up for us while we were on trip to Spain was I had a little multi-cart with a little button on the back. And it had like 100 games on it. And I had DuckTales. And I remember a Mickey Mouse game. And there's... a lot of them were like just basically ports of NES games. And I used to play Pokemon in Japanese, so that was how bad this game had. I had Bionic Command. I had hundreds of, and that was the problem for me with my Game Boy era was, other than having like Super Mario Land and Super Mario Land 2, and I feel because I ended up with these 2 game cards with like 100 games on each, I never ever brought any ever again. Obviously, as a kid, you didn't buy them, but. And in those eras, you kind of played a little bit and you stopped. I always remember DuckTales was that kind of cool game of, you had the different levels and stuff. So I do remember Mickey Mouse and DuckTales being the 2 games I played a lot as a kid on my Game Boy. More recently, the last few years, I was playing a lot of Kingdom Hearts 358 along my last holiday last year in Mexico. And even when I went to Spain earlier this year, I've clocked up 20, 25 hours in Kingdom Hearts game, being portable. PlayStation Vita as well was a game that I had quite a... I brought the PS Vita with the Disney pack, and I ended up with 6 classic PlayStation games on there. So you had like Mickey Mania, which was one of my favourite games on the Genesis. So I remember, there's a lot of playing that. But Lego, I played a lot of Lego Marvel Heroes, and Disney Infinity 2.0 was a game that I had on my Vita as well. That was a game that I actually put quite a bit of time in, because I was able to I used to be able to build basic games and then transfer it over. But it's kind of an odd thing, like with portable games. There was just so much out, but there was also a lot of sort of low end games on there as well.
Yeah, and I think that was what kept me away from most of the portable games. Was there was obviously a quality difference between the portable games and the full releases, and there was actually quite a bit of time when I just wasn't playing Disney games. Period. Yeah. So, I think if we're talking like mobile games, where for me I'm mostly talking about in the last couple of years actually on my phone rather than on like a 3DS or anything like that. So
I think that's the big difference. I mean, I picked up 3D Disney Art Academy, and we were sat on the sunbed, me and my wife kind of taking turns in doing that, and that was kind of a lot of fun last year. But as you said, the mobile games I think have changed it up a bit, because I think that's where, and I can see almost like from Disney's point of view, the days of making full-on handheld games, that's where they are. There's so many more basic ones on there to play over the years. Disney Magic Kingdoms, Disney Zoom Zoom, the Free to Win game, or the Free Match Freeze, all these kind of Disney Infinity. There's been so many sort of mobile games that have been a lot of fun on there. And so it's almost like, it's like you say, there's almost like two different, I'm saying that, maybe even now 3 different eras of video games. You had the PSP and the Vita and the DS and the Game Boy. You had mobile, and then we're going to go into Switch. And I think there's almost like the Switch is going to take it into a different era.
Well, I mean, the quality is obviously going to be significantly higher because they're console quality games rather than 3DS quality games or whatever. So obviously we don't have any yet on the Switch, but when we do, it's going to make a very big difference.
Yeah, it's definitely it's that kind of thing as well. I think like playing, like the thing is with these portable games is quite often they're just pick up and play, and as I think once you become an adult, there's that thing of the thing has always got me with like a lot of people talk about their 3DS and stuff. I think it really depends on your lifestyle as how much of these portable devices of how much use. If you have got a 20-30 minute bus ride, or you're on a train in the morning going to work, or you haven't got that living room, I do remember using my Game Boy a lot when I was a kid, and that is primarily depends on your era, would have depending on what you would have used.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you are a more recent gamer, you're never going to have the memory of playing DuckTales on the Game Boy at home because that would be ancient history. Yeah. So, but we'll see how the Switch kind of works into that with the current generation and maybe the upcoming generation of children who are just starting to get into games.
Yeah, I think it's an odd feeling of thinking like in 15, 20 years time, kids are going to be looking back and going, so much of their experiences are going to be apps. And, if I want to go back I can go buy DuckTales on the Game Boy and play it on a Retron. You can still do that. Whereas an app, if you want to play Disney's Enchanted Tales, you're out of luck.
Yeah, there's only one place to get that. So
it's I do think just in how Disney and Handheld have kind of been, they've been together very much. Because I think primarily kids portable is a core audience, is a kind of major thing of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there's plenty of times when, as an adult, and I can't speak for parents because I'm not a parent myself, but definitely situations where you're like, just here's the 3DS, go into your room and play something quietly, not here. So, and that makes it easier.
Yeah. I mean, I remember having, I had 2 games. I know one of them was Ninja Turtles, and it was a little big green thing with a little display on it, and he literally, it was just like, the image just went up and down, and things came at it, and you'd like one button to press, and you had to add up, and and those kind of games of like, they were so basic, but there were so many of these like Disney little games out when I was a kid and stuff, and that was the introduction before the Game Boy, and it definitely, I remember having like, using my Game Boy Advance while I was at, when I started my work in an office, and it was that kind of weird thing I think as well of like Game Boy. We're going right up to the 2000s for Game Boy Advance and stuff. At which point we're into like PlayStation 2 era. There was such a gap between.
Oh yeah.
It wasn't really till the PSP that came along and that kind of changed everything, and you started getting a lot better ones. And I really regret now that I didn't know about like Birth by Sleep the first time round. I really have, like, I have like, a little bit of regret. I go, I really wish, and like, you know, like people talk, you know, like Greg Miller and stuff talk about all these great games on Vita, and it was always that kind of thing. Well, I can play on my Vita, but I can just play on my PlayStation, so therefore I never bothered with it. Whereas I think like now my Switch has become, I think like that ever since the Switch came out, every week I take my Switch out the dock and I go to my in-laws and I sit on the couch for an hour or two and play at my in-laws because, you know, we're there all day and it's just chilling out kind of thing. And that aspect of having that, you know, is there if I want it. For me personally, work-wise, I have a 10-minute walk to work. I don't have that time thing. And when I did my commute to university, I did used to take my Game Boy, but I used to try and do all my homework on the train, so that when I got home, I could spend time on the PlayStation too. And I tried to use my time a little more effectively on the train, so I had more time on gaming when I got back. But
yeah, I think a lot of us had that kind of adventure. For me, it was taking the bus home and be like, all right, get as much homework done on the bus as possible, and when I get home, I can play some Final Fantasy 3.
Well, that was the thing. I remember like having like to get to university, it was like an hour on the train because rather than live in, I commuted. So I used to have like 2 hours a day on the train, and yeah, I used to have my Game Boy. I think I ended up getting the Game Boy. I don't know when the Game Boy SP came out because I remember having the little clamshell one, but that might have been for work. See, I've brought so many handhelds over the years. So 2003. So that was that must have been when I went off to Australia. I think I must have had that one with me then. It was, you know, I always had like these kind of games. You know, I've always had them with me, and they've always been something that I just kind of. I never really invested a lot of time in, but I always brought them, and I always had a few games, and that was the problem. I don't think I ever finished a handheld game.
You know, I think that's probably the case for me because so many times, like, I would set the handheld down and then not come back to it for 3 or 4 months, and then, wait, where was I? What am I supposed to be doing here? Whether or not it has save state or not. Like, all right, well, I guess I'm starting from the beginning again.
Yeah, it was always, I think, but it's always been that kind of great thing. I think for me, it's like, you know, I've always had like a handheld in the drawer. So, you know, if you're going away for a weekend, or if you're going away for a week, or on holiday, or you know, you've maybe got, you know, you've got a long journey, or there was always that thing I've always reached in, and I think I've always had a Disney game. I've always had some kind of Disney games in the box or with it next to it. So, but it's always in like just pick up, play for half an hour, etc. The Vita was a lot easier, I think, because you had the install stuff. You didn't have to worry about when you had those UMD things for the PSP.
Oh god, those were terrible.
So you used to have to put them in and stuff. So it was a little bit more tricky on them. But yeah, you know, I think over the years it's always been that situation of just grab your console, you know, and you chuck it in your bag and you go off. You know, I did a lot of backpacking. So, you know, I used to, half the trouble was getting the charge, but it was always that kind of situation of having, you know, basic games. But you didn't really want, it was always just like half hour, 20 minutes, things like that. So you never really put the time in like you would do on a console game. Yeah,
and it's only been in recent years when they've really started putting out the mobile games, the Vita games, and the 3DS games are kind of like, oh yeah, this is a 60-hour experience. Like, excuse me.
Yeah. But I think it's the only issue I've always had with recently, like with the mobile games, is if you were on a plane and you turned on your iPad and you'd be like, none of them would work because you had to have Wi-Fi or some kind. And that's been like the big issue of why I've been very reluctant to rely on them on planes because so very few of my apps will work without an internet connection.
Yeah, I think I can do like Disney Emoji Blitz. I think that's the game I can play on a plane. So if I know I have a long ride, I will bring my tablet along and I'll load it up with movies rather than worrying about trying to get games. Of course, I haven't traveled yet now that I own a Switch, and we'll see how that goes. I might feel a little bit silly playing a Switch on a plane next to like a proper gentleman or something.
Oh, no, I don't. Because there's always that. I'm sat there on the plane playing Super Mario Brothers. Yeah, you wish you brought this. And they're sitting there like, you can see that. like looking over and stuff. But also, like, I always find that thing as well of like, you know, if you're in a just having different options and stuff. But I think having Disney game, I always feel like I've always had like something on there ready to go. But for me, I think that sort of Game Boy era was kind of great. And then the PSP I remember having, but I didn't use as much. It was then the Vita kind of was like a reimagining of me. And now going forward, you know, I know when I'm going to have, you know, it's like even now to my storage of my cards they now go in the case, my handheld case. You know, there is that difference with it, and I think I didn't have that with the Vita. I mean, if you ever tried traveling with Disney Infinity 2.0 on the Vita, I actually I brought some spare figures on sale, and I got a couple of, and literally I had extra. And it was you know, it's trying to sit there with all this stuff, and it was just horrible. And they didn't really think about it properly. But generally, I think as a whole, there's been so many different games and stuff over the time that have been a lot of fun on handheld mode.
Well, yeah, I mean, speaking of Infinity, obviously we see the Switch version of Skylanders, which you don't need the figures. You know, you still need to save to the figures if you want to use them across games, but you don't have to carry them along with you. And then the 3DS versions of the Skylanders games in the past also had that. We never got that with Infinity, and I always thought that was a major oversight for the Vita version. And heck, there was a 3D or a DS version of the original Infinity, which I never played it, and for good reason.
No,
so
it's that kind of situation as well. I just like never really sort of getting into that. You know, you just didn't need it, and I think that was always the issue with some of those games is you just did not need to play them. But there's probably kids now growing up, like I said, it was so mobile games have definitely changed. You know, you sit there on the couch, you know, you fire up, you know, Inside Out or something like that, and I do, you know, I think I've played probably more handheld games like that in the last few years than I probably did for a decade.
I mean, Magic Kingdoms, Disney Magic Kingdoms by itself, because of the nature of the game, where you constantly have to check it during events and whatnot. I've probably put more hours into that than any Disney game I've ever played, except for Infinity. Infinity's probably going to be the king of that forever, simply because of like how many videos we ended up making for toy boxes and stuff like that.
So much, but I feel like for me, definitely the last years, I think that the app side of things has been, and also I think because so many different games, if you like whatever style you like, there was a Disney game or a Marvel or Star Wars game to kind of tie in with that. But just as a general, I think, you know, there's been a lot of history playing like history games and stuff. But I'd love to know what have been like some of your history, what's your handheld mode. I'd love to know what you guys are thinking as well. Anything else you want to add to that, James?
Not really. Except that, you know, let's start getting some Disney games on the Switch and let's start taking advantage of that, guys.
Yes. The Disney afternoon would have been perfect for the Switch.
And it still might be.
Yes.
So.
But on that note, guys, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button to keep up with the latest episodes from Infinity and beyond. Check us out over at DisKingdom.com. Check out James over at HeroicLegacy.com, and we shall see you guys soon. Later.